Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we're talking distance, which is what you'll probably want to keep from the movie, keep your distance, and where you'll be standing when it comes to dealing your top tier god mode ranged DPS in World of Warcraft, Battle for Azeroth. Because, you know, obviously you want to be back here and not anywhere near where the actual baddies are, and no, it's not because you're scared of the baddies, okay? Of course not. It's because you need to be able to properly see your cool new spellcasting animations, and also because you're a bit scared. And as the new expansion build-up nears its final stages, and all the new class mechanics are in place awaiting the final tuning, apart from some very notable exceptions, which we'll be talking about. Oh, we will be talking about them. It's time to take a look at the ranged DPS classes and see what's what. What's the most fun to play? What's the most improved? What spec fills which niche? And then we'll all decide to play Warlock and everyone will be happy. No, but seriously, there are some really fun and interesting specs in this category, so without further ado, join us as we rate the ranged DPS classes in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth, okay? Go, 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 go. Balanced Druid in Legion was a strange beast. I mean, yes, it's a 7-foot tall chicken that shoots moonbeams out of its wings, which is strange enough, that's all the time. But last expansion, I never felt like I was balancing very much of anything, really. Least of all bringing delicate astrological forces into line to harness the power of the sun and stars for fat deeps. If I'm honest, most of my time was spent starfalling the shit out of literally anything I could see, and if I wasn't starfalling the shit out of anything, then I was trying to get through a pretty stilted builder rotation to get enough astral power to starfall the shit out of literally anything I could see. So news that artifact ability Full Moon, which was the most interesting, if slightly annoying, part of that stilted rotation, was getting relegated to talent status in BfA, had me assuming that I wouldn't be spending much time with the chicken this expansion. I mean, to be honest, I never spend much time with the chicken because that's what Glyph of Stars is for, right? But you know what I mean. So it's a great pleasure and no little surprise to inform you that actually the new Balanced Druid is a really fun, well-designed spec, which improves massively on the Legion version and which puts balance right up the pecking order in Battle for Azeroth. The core of the spec remains similar. You use your 2 dots, your single target filler, and your multi-target filler to build up astral power, which you then spend on Star Surge, a hard hitter that also empowers your 2 fillers, so they hit harder too, or that big old aforementioned Starfall. The big difference in BfA is that using either of those fillers can now empower the other one by themselves. This is such a small but elegant change, which makes a massive difference. Now, suddenly, you're not relying on Star Surge for all of your empowerment. Now, suddenly, you're swapping between Lunar Strike and Solar Wrath much more often to make the most of those procs, and this is something that we're seeing a lot of in the class design of BfA. A simplification which, far from being a dumbing down, actually makes the general rotation much more enjoyable and engaging. Obviously, Starfall is still very powerful despite a general nerf, and means that balance is still at its absolute best when it needs to deliver a whole ton of burst AOE, but the spec is now equipped for some really good cleave and single target too. And if you really miss New Moon, well, you can talent it. Although why would anyone do that when you could take Fury of Elune? Because seriously, look at it. Balance has flown under the radar a bit so far in all the pre-expansion talk, but I'm not the only big fan of this new iteration, so expect to see it crop up quite a bit more in BfA. And so to the first of what the community is very loudly referring to as the 2 broken or unfinished specs. Ian has basically flat out said that Shadow will be seeing proper revision in an upcoming major patch, and rightfully so, because at this exact moment in time, it feels like an absolute jumble of a class. Legion Shadow Priest was all about keeping Void form up as much as possible, and the majority of the fun came in pushing those haste-filled roller coaster windows as long as possible. It was, in my opinion, great fun with a high skill ceiling, but it was also a style that made it absolutely useless in some situations. So in Battle for Azeroth, we see a more streamlined version, where damage is easier to do, but unfortunately is less fun and engaging as a result. So now, you won't be keeping Void form up for long periods of time, no matter how good you are. Like, you could be Idris Elba good, but I'm sorry, it's just not possible. The amount of haste you get per Void form stack has been nerfed, and Void Torrent, Mindbender, and Lingering Insanity are all on the same talent row. You're meant to dip in and out of Void form in Battle for Azeroth, which is a good idea in principle, but those used to the Legion style will feel like they're playing with a handicap. In fact, the talents in general are probably the most annoying of all the classes. I mean, Shadow Word Death, a talent, goth mate. But, and this is a big but, there are advantages to this. Dark Ascension is a fun way to have back-to-back void forms, and Surrender to Madness doesn't kill you anymore, but will almost kill you and is on a 4-minute cooldown, which gives it more varied uses. But quick AOE is now that much easier because there's not that big ramp up. Oh, and also because Void Eruption now just hits everything, and by the way, looks like this. Yes, like this. So Shadow's toolkit has been greatly improved and diversified, and it looks like they're going to do very solid damage in BfA. So if you only care about damage meters, Shadow Priest is going to be fine. It just plays clunky at Ironside's dance mat. But of course, changes are coming, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Void Form become a standard cooldown, which would be a real shame. Here's hoping they can find a way to make it work, because Shadow should be really cool. Ah, who doesn't love mages? With their mana buns and their portals to the wrong Dalaran, you know what you're getting with a mage. You're getting squashed by anything that touches you, yes, but you're also getting a mechanic-cheesing ice block and 3 pure ranged DPS specs, which means surely, whatever happens, at least one of them is going to be in a great place, right? They've all got shiny new remove curse and arcane intellect utility, but which mage is the best mage? Well, it's probably not Arcane, sorry. I had really good fun with Arcane's conserve, okay, burn playstyle in Legion, despite it never really coming into its own. And BfA sees it remain the most mechanically unique mage spec, which I just said was a really great thing about Balanced Druid, because it is. A small tweak allows much more interplay between its core abilities. With Arcane though, it seems to have the opposite effect, and so much of its interplay has gone missing. Arcane Explosion and Arcane Missiles now won't have their damage increased by Arcane Charges. And seriously, where are all those lovely meaty Arcane Missile procs? They've been replaced by a poxy little clear casting proc, which feels a lot less impactful. For me, at least, these are a fun part of the core gameplay that's been removed. That said, I do understand the reasoning, and I do get the idea behind it. Arcane Missiles don't need to proc like they did before, because now you can just cast them at any time with mana, which means that you have access to good damage even with no Arcane Charges. Nice one. And it does make the whole, okay, burn phase a lot easier to land too, with mana generally being a non-issue now in the conserve phase. It's still going to do incredibly effortless, though repetitive, burst dungeon cleave and AOE, and who knows, it might well up being the boss mage when it comes to numbers, but you know what? Michael Bay's Turtles movies did better numbers than Labyrinth. It doesn't mean they're as good. A mage spec I really do like in Battle for Azeroth, though, is the Fire Mage, mostly because it's pretty much exactly the same as in Legion, but with all the best or most fun little extras that you gathered throughout the expansion added as talents. This is an approach that some people hate about class design in BfA, but in this case at least, it totally works in doubling down on what's really fun about the spec in the first place, which is all about fast, reactive gameplay based around proccing those sweet instacast pyroblasts. That's all in place, which is good because it's awesome, and Blizzard have added the effects of 2 top-end Legion legendaries, albeit slightly weakened, in Pyroclasm and Searing Touch, which, far from being lazy, is actually more like entering a cheat code in GTA where you get all the coolest guns straight away, and I am totally down with that, because I'm totally down with a really enjoyable gameplay which does excellent priority burst damage and stacked AoE, and which can move around essentially however it likes. Sign me up. One thing you are going to miss is all those Legion traits that extended combustion. The most you're going to get out of this cooldown is a very short feeling 10 seconds, but it certainly does level out Fire's damage, which is probably a plus overall, I think. Everything feels like it works straight out of the box for Fire Mages in BfA, even taking into account their notorious dependence on critical strike, which can make the early days feel really frustrating. A bit less frustrating in Battle for Azeroth is Frost Mage. Like Fire, it keeps the same shape and feel as Legion, but it's like Jude Law's head. If anything, it's becoming even smoother. It's the most procky mage spec, which is also heavily dependent on its DPS cooldown windows. So obviously, if you get good RNG in that window, you feel like a god and the best player in the world, which you obviously are. But if RNG Jesus is off work that day, then you feel really, really bad. Frostmage has a simple solution for that in BfA though. The procs proc more often. Brain Freeze's chances have gone from 15 to 20%, and your fingers have a 15% chance of getting Frosty from Frostbolt and 10% from Frozen Orb. Both were at 12 before, so overall this will see you beat the house more often in the Frostmage roulette, and gets a thumbs up from me. Another heartening thing is that at the moment on beta, Glacial Spike is the preferred talent choice, and if that remains the meta on live, which I doubt, but it might, then it certainly would give the spec a lot more definition and that little bit less RNG again. Mind you, saying that Frost has a little less RNG is a bit like saying there's one less shit Twilight novel. It doesn't make a huge load of difference, but still. Now, I drew the ire of Shaman players in our melee video by saying that despite all of its pretty obvious problems, Enhancement Shaman is still very good fun to play. Well, I hope you're ready to hate me again, Shaman players, because Enhancement is another spec that's generally considered dead on BfA arrival, and which Blizzard have promised to fix in a future patch. And I can totally see why Enhancement players are angry, but honestly, really honestly, I can't help but have a big smile on my face every time I pick this class up right now. On the face of it, Elemental looks almost exactly the same as last expansion. The simplest of builder-spender specs with zero mobility and amazing visuals, but the devil is in the detail here. The whole thing is a lot slower and less intuitive, and not in a, oh, it's a new expansion, all my stats are terrible type way, but in a Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt generate less Maelstrom. Why would you make Lava Burst and Lightning Bolt generate less Maelstrom? Seriously, why would you do that type way? And with big spender Earthshock now set at 60 Maelstrom rather than being dynamic, this makes for a pretty rough slog just to be able to unleash the weirdly least visually satisfying big hitter in the game, which is really annoying because I should really like the set Maelstrom cost of Earthshock. This is a really good change. The now obligatory feeling Echo of Elements is on the same talent row as Elemental Blast, which is a choice no one wants to have to make, and lots of the other talents feel likewise odd or lackluster or just flat out downgrades on Legion. So I get it, LE players, I really do. But at its core, I still just enjoy Elemental gameplay. It's fun, it's got fantastic utility. Going all zappy boy on a ton of mobs is always going to be great. It's easy to get caught up in the details when you're on the inside looking out, but if someone were to try Elemental for the first time in Battle for Azeroth, I think they'd be shocked at what a good time they were having, despite everyone telling them how terrible it is. There are two things that everybody knows about Beast Mastery Hunters. The first is that it was definitely their pet that just pulled the boss halfway through the countdown. The second is that it's super easy to play. In fact, it's so simple that basically all you need to do well as a BM Hunter is 3 fingers or a keyboard wide enough to comfortably roll your head over for the duration of a raid encounter. Either one will be just fine. My own raid leader plays BM, not because he's a noob, but because he can play it effectively without really thinking. So he can concentrate on what's happening in the raid, and also because he's a noob. But here's the thing, all of this isn't to say that Beast Mastery is a bad spec. It's much easier to play Sonic 2 than Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, but yeah, you get the idea. And that simplicity is once again at the core of Beastmaster in Battle for Azeroth. The big change being Barbed Shot, which is basically Dire Frenzy but with a twist. It's your main focus generator, puts a bleed on the target, and increases your pet's attack speed, stacking 3 times. So obviously you're going to want to keep those stacks up, especially if you've talented Thrill of the Hunt, which gives you 3 stacks of crit with it as well. So Barbed Shot isn't a simple use on cooldown ability, but something you want to be holding off using charges of so that you can stay more stacked than Dwayne Johnson playing Jenga, while also balancing the need for the focus that it gives so that you can use your 2 main spenders, as focus generation is a bit slower in BfA. Okay, so it's not rocket science, but it is surprisingly trickier than you might imagine, and certainly engaging. Ooh, and just in case you can't possibly live without very good boy Hattie, fear not, because you can talent Dire Beast and have your 2 pets out Legion style. Its biggest strength is still its single target burst damage, and it's pretty much as you were for Beast Mastery. Ooh, what's this? A complete rework for Marksmanship, you say? No more vulnerable windows to worry about? A spec which is much more the varied and light on its feet, uber mobile raid mechanic dog's body you want from a hunter? Yes please, that'll do nicely. Marksmanship feels really good in BfA, with the tunnel vision of the Legion playstyle opened up to a wide-ish, open-ish vista. Your rotation now is based around using the slower and stationary aim shot charges to buff your arcane or multi-shots. And the great thing about the aim shot buff is that it's on you, not the target. And the only RNG involved is whether you get 1 or 2 buffed shots when you use it. Steady Shot is your occasional focus generating filler, and I say occasional because more often than not you'll be using Rapid Shot for that, which feels great. It's nice to have focus generation tied to such a meaty damage ability, and it looks really cool. Or does it? I mean, is this cool? I think this is cool, but I also think it might be slightly shit. I actually can't decide if this is shit or cool. It's like Death Stranding, help me please. Marksmanship's AOE isn't fantastic, but it's good enough and quite intuitive. The Trick Shot passive lets you turn your single target rotation onto large amounts of bunched mobs just by dropping a multi-shot before each aimed or rapid shot. But perhaps most interestingly of all, Lone Wolf is now a baseline passive ability that will kick in whenever you have no pet summoned. This means that in theory, in a raid or Mythic Plus environment, Marksmanship can enjoy all the benefits of being petless, but then summon a furry best friend as needed for reses or bloodlust or other abilities, giving them pretty amazing utility. All of this adds up to give hunters the extended toolkit they need to fill the gaps in any group, which is exactly the gaps they want to be filling. Okay, yes, I admit, I've been putting off talking about Warlocks in this video because, yes, everything you've heard is true. They really are that good. The fact is that Warlock players can choose between 3 pure ranged DPS specs, and in Battle for Azeroth, every single one of them is amongst the strongest, funnest, and most satisfying specs in the game. And between them, they have every base covered. Basically, imagine the Hemsworth brothers, except imagine they're all Chris Hemsworth, and that's what we're talking here, okay? When Ian Hazzikostas was talking about how powerful Affliction was in Legion, he famously said, "No king rules forever," which turned out to be a complete lie because they still are undoubtedly the kings of damage over time, which will always be great in raids, and if anything, their playstyle has only been improved in Battle for Azeroth. It feels a lot more classic actually, as Drain Soul makes way for old favourite Shadow Bolt. You can talent back into it if you want, but let's face it, you won't. Where Affliction gets really interesting though, and where its skill ceiling gets higher, is in the cooldowns. Dark Glare is the base ability that summons one of those one-eye demon things, which extends your active dots for 8 seconds. Remember, you can have 7 of those up on a single target, and which deals more damage relative to how many dots were active when it was summoned, which I know has already set your top of the meter's senses tingling, but now think about how the best players are going to combine that with Haunt, Dark Soul Misery, which increases your haste, and Death Bolt, which deals more damage for how much time is left on all of your dots. And basically, we're going to need to start a charity for abused DPS meters because they are going to take an absolute pasting, and basically it's not fair. Add it all together and it looks like there might just be a bit of life left in the old king yet. Destruction, by contrast, is the most straight up, direct and traditional of all the Warlock specs, and possibly of all the ranged DPS. It's usually one of my favourites to play in any expansion, and that's true again in Battle for Azeroth. It's a priority rotation based on building soul shards, the new improved soul shard system that Destro had in place since 7.2, you'll be pleased to hear, and spending them on big, fat, veiny Chaos Bolts. And yes, that's what a Chaos Bolt looks like now. Congratulations, GG. The thing I love about Destruction in Battle for Azeroth is that it feels like it's been designed by someone who really loves Destruction Warlocks, who knows why it's fun and doubles down on 2 of the most fundamental aspects of its playstyle. Backdraft is now baseline, and spec-defining Havoc is now down from 40 to a 25-second cooldown, so it's faster and harder hitting, and in a fight with 2 main targets, there's still no one better. It may be a very simple spec, but all of Destruction's abilities feel impactful, look great, and make sense. It's fast, fun and predictable, and no, I'm not going to make a joke about my sex life at this point, you'll just have to do that one yourselves. The spec that everyone is talking about though is Demonology, because haven't you heard? After Ian basically told us that they purposely broke it because they didn't want us playing it at the end of Warlords, and then a whole expansion of living under Affliction's tyrannical rule, Demo is back. It's super fun, it's super OP. Basically everyone needs to spec Demo, okay? Go! And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, that sounds suspiciously exactly what everyone was saying about Demo in the Legion beta, and it turned out to be pretty horrible, so why would we believe you now? And, well, that's actually true, and a pretty good point, smartass. So, okay, let me tell you what it's all about, and you can make up your own mind. Demonic Empowerment. Yes, that terrible mechanic that everyone hated and everyone said would improve the spec massively if it went, is gone. Good start. But the real masterstroke is Demon Bolt, and the way that it procs off some imp damage and all Dreadstalkers, so the more demons you summon, the more procs you get, which means more soul shards, which means you can summon more demons, which means you get more procs, which means more demons, which will come in pretty handy when your cooldown Demonic Tyrant comes along and empowers them all and increases their duration. And oh, did we mention the exploding bats and how implosion is still a thing? And honestly, this is just stupid and really, really fun. As it stands, at this moment, Demonology is not just capable of some truly insane burst single target and AOE damage, but is the best looking, most quirky, unique, and flat out entertaining spec in the game. And frankly, I hope you like them and their cool new spell animations, because Demonology Warlocks and their millions of imps are going to be absolutely everywhere in Battle for Azeroth. At least until their damage gets nerfed and everyone goes Affliction instead, obviously. But what do you think, guys? What do you love the look of? How have Blizzard ruined your favourite class? And why am I completely wrong about Elemental Shaman being quite fun? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make them happen. The last 3 weeks have been absolutely insane, and now we're going on honeymoon, and basically there wouldn't have been anything on this channel all month if it wasn't for them. So thank you guys, we owe you big time. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Luxley. No, I'm Taliesin from me and my new wife, Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.